All right. Hello, everybody. Greg Green here, and thank you for joining us for the Laird Barron 2024 read along. This is our second webcast with Laird and special guest Phil Gelatt, and we'll introduce him in just a moment. I am really excited for this time to talk through the stories of Occultation and also the feature film They Remain. We are doing the last couple of moments worth of checking on the YouTube broadcast, making sure things are coming through okay. And yes, it is, in fact. Let me see if I can knock there we go. Cool. Yeah. So we are going to be taking your questions during the live Q&A about the stories in Occultation, and we're essentially going to kind of go through them one at a time in the order in which they appear in the book. We might jump ahead to other specific stories as need be as the conversation leads, but we are excited to take your questions. We'll ask them live, and if you got one for a story a little bit later in Occultation, then just hold on to it. And we will get to that. And also, of course, have a number of questions that were posted on the Laird Barron subreddit. Over on the Reddit community, we've got heading toward 1,000 members. Yeah, 957 members now on the Laird Barron subreddit. Really excited to see an explosion of interest in Laird's work and the conversations going on Reddit. If you're watching this Q&A and you have not joined the subreddit, go ahead and do that. Just go over to reddit.com and search for Laird Barron. A lot of great conversations going on. And of course, this is all part of the read along of his horror fiction leading up to the September 10 release of Not a Speck of Light, Laird's first collection since 2016, coming from Bad Hand Books. And we're super excited about that. I know there's some new stories in that collection and probably a lot of stories that folks have not read that have been published in various journals and publications. And Laird, by the way, I'm very excited to say that I found a copy. Oh, I put it on the floor. Hold on. I got to show you this. Sorry, I've got books like everywhere now, and there we go. I did find a print copy of Mystery Tribune number 19. I was afraid it was ebook only, but your story Learn to Die was published in this, and the publisher, I reached out to them and they were able to find me a print copy. So
very nice.
Thrilled to have that. Also queued up next is a story in Disintegration. That's one of the antiquity stories, I believe. Yes. That is the Eyes Like Evil Prisms coming out soon, or that has just come out recently, I should say.
That's my Rush-inspired horror fantasy story.
Nice. Oh, that's great. I've been on a Rush kick lately. I don't know what it is, other than they're just really.
The story's nothing to do with it, but I got some imagery from Snow Dog, so
nice.
Versus Vitor, and there's a mention of the Necromancer, and I can't remember if he had evil prism eyes, but there's all that kind of stuff in there. I'm like, I like that.
Nice. That's awesome. So we've got new collection coming up soon. Your Patreon has just launched. It's been open for I think maybe 8 days or something, just over a week. You've got currently 350 members, 127 paid members. I mean, it's really taken off pretty quickly. Any kind of reaction to the number of folks who've joined in the short space of a week?
I'm thrilled. I'm grateful. And my goal with it is to complement my novel writing and my short fiction writing. And as I'm developing it, I'm really excited about it because it's going to become a massive archive of my extant work. I'm working on. I'm going to be posting all kinds of short stories on it, serialized fiction, and also I think maybe one of the more valuable aspects of it is I've written a lot about other authors, and of course Patreon, it's like a really good WordPress or Substack site you can link. So I'm having a lot of fun going through some of my reprint essays that I'm posting and I'm able to link to the various authors, their Wikipedia sites, or their web pages, or their Britannica encyclopedia, and I have profiles already of various writers and reviews and introductions that I've done over the last 15, 16 years. But I have many profiles. Like, for example, I'm working on Jeff Ford. I'll do Kelly Lank, Stephen Graham Jones, just
awesome.
You name it, right? Among living contemporaries. And the profiles they're all going to be between 500 and 1,000 words, and they're not going to be academically heavy. They're going to be more, hey, when I first met Jeff Ford, this is sort of a conversation we had. And by the way, here's a couple of his books, and here's what other people have said about him. And, and there's some links to his stuff. And that's sort of the tenor of those. And I think it's going to be really special over time when as I put stuff up over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'm noticing other folks, in particular in the horror fiction world. Philip Fracassi has a Patreon as well. Sadie Hartman's out there, a big proponent and champion for horror.
Matthew
Matt Bartlett's out there, yes,
yep.
Yeah. So it's great to have that maybe a little bit not more permanent than Twitter, let's say, but a little bit more substantive and long form. And I love seeing the review you published of Gemma Files' I think first big collection, Kissing Carrion, which I know is a classic of now contemporary classic.
Right, and like I just put up an essay in 2 parts, but it's a 4,000 word essay. I mean, there's to speak to substance. I mean, you can do bite-sized capsule reviews, or you can put a novel on there, and you're going to see it. You're going to see that spectrum. I plan on serializing The Light is the Darkness, for example, at some point, which is
one. That's great to hear, because man, it's
42,000 words. I mean, so there's going to be. My goal is to make this a site worth subscribing to.
That is fantastic. Good. And yes, yeah,
Nice.
I remember just like maybe a year and a half ago, you go to eBay at least and find a handful of copies out there, and there's nothing out. I mean, it's not out there anymore.
I hope to bring it. Obviously, I'm going to serialize it, but I also hope to have it recover, bring it out again. Right now, it's in sort of a limbo because of contractual issues, which I can't get into. But I do want to bring it out and have it, with somebody, whomever wants to bring it out. But I have to deal with the contract issues first.
Yeah. Understood. And also just one other note about Patreon, you're also on there, there's a chat feature in Patreon, and you're on there taking people's questions, people like kind of pitching their fan theories about what's going on, and you've been pretty open about weighing in on, you can think of Tom Mandibole as being this sort of thing, and there's some hints that maybe he's also such and such. So like you're dishing some pretty good information on some of the more mysterious aspects of the story.
Not to go too far with this, but just for the free tier, you get access to a kind of a newsletter once a month, and my bibliography, which I think is pretty, all the links to all the stories I've had published pretty much. So I think that's nice. If you are on one of the paid tiers, there's a chat feature, and I have a couple headings where you can ask me anything basically, and I am very responsive. I really want to. I want to create a sort of a that's my social media presence now. My social media presence is going to be pretty much non-existent elsewhere, except just as a method of updating. I'm not. Any interaction I have is pretty much going to be focused on this avenue.
Very good. So yeah, folks, if you're not following Laird on Patreon, go ahead and jump out to Patreon. I'll throw a link in the chat for that. Just at the very least, go and sign up to follow him, a free account. But even I think the first level's at $5 a month. It's not a huge investment, and following you on socials has been one of to me one of the coolest experience of being out in the horror community and following folks on Twitter. So I'm glad to be able to follow you on Patreon as well.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody who has.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. also want to ask you real quick for the latest on the move. You've been there in the same place in Hudson Valley for I think 9 years. You said, and unfortunately having to move. Anything that you want to any update you can share with that? How's the house hunting going?
Oh, just we were here for many years, loved it. Unfortunately, our landlady needs to renovate the place, and so off we go. But it looks like we're going to have a new place to move to. It's it's very, as everybody. I mean, if this is something everyone can relate to, especially the longer you stay somewhere. So that's a kind of a stressful situation. But I was confident all along that we would get it solved, and it looks like we have. So, but now the moving, we've solved pretty much the finding the place. Now the next step is going to be getting moving all our stuff, but that'll happen.
Are you going to stay in the Hudson Valley area?
Yes.
Awesome. Great.
Well, I'm not going to quite say where we're moving, but we're moving within half an hour of here. So
cool.
It's still, I can see the Catskills still. So. Nice.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. I know that of course the Catskills and the whole region show up so prominently in so much of the fiction you've written over the last decade or so.
I love it here. I absolutely love it here. It's become a character in my stories, as I assumed it would after time.
Very good. Very good. Well, we've got a special guest here along with Laird, and that's Philip Gelatt Jr. Hi, Phil. How are you?
Put the junior in. Thank you.
Yes.
you did the whole name.
The whole thing, man. And I still am not sure if it's Gelatt or Gelatt.
Gelatt.
Okay. I thought so.
Yeah.
Phil, how are you?
I'm great. Yeah, I'm doing very well. Excited to be here.
You are the adapter, writer, director of the feature film They Remain, which is based on Laird's story 30 from Occultation. So we're thrilled to have you on to talk about that movie, and we'll talk about that just a little bit later in the webcast. But just by way of introducing yourself, what are some other films or TV series that folks may know you from?
Sure. So I have worked in film, TV, and video games. So you might know me from a science fiction film called Europa Report that came out a long time ago at this point, or They Remain, or The Spine of Night, which is a rotoscope animated fantasy film that I co-wrote and co-directed that came out 2 years ago. I also wrote the majority of the episodes of Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix. And, I can never remember my whole biography. Oh, in video games, I wrote Rise of the Tomb Raider, co-wrote Rise of the Tomb Raider with many other talented writers. And then last year, I wrote Amnesia the Bunker for Frictional Games, part of their Amnesia series, and I'm working on another game with them now. So, a bunch of stuff.
In any more TV series type work in the near future?
Yeah, in the future, yes, but not for a while. These things take forever. So, there are a couple of things. One is nearing the end of production, so that will come out. I actually think later this year, and then a couple other things. If they ever reach fruition, won't be for years and years. So,
what about feature films? Any other feature films coming up?
Imminently, no. No, nothing. I mean, we want to do a sequel to Spine of Night. I have not to break news. I have a script currently on my hard drive for a sequel to Spine of Night, but that movie took 7 years to make, and the sequel would take, well, who knows how long it would take. So hopefully one day there will be more of that, but it will be a while. So
can you just give us there's just like so much you could say about Spine of Night. It is such a unique project. Unlike anything I've seen since I found the 16 millimeter films of Bakshi's Lord of the Rings when I was a teenager and was able to get a projector and actually show them at my house to some friends, or the movie Heavy Metal, would be something that's similar. Can you tell us just a little bit about Spine of Night? How why you went after such an interesting and unique project with such a specific style to it?
Yeah, I did it Sort of, because I didn't think anybody else would do it. So my co-writer and co-director on the project is a really talented guy named Morgan Galen King. So he had made a short film. He had taught himself to rotoscope animate watching behind the scenes footage of Ralph Bakshi. So way back after the aforementioned Europa report came out, I saw a short he had made called Exordium, which you can see on YouTube. And I thought to myself, this is amazing. This is what I want to be doing. Nobody will let us do this, and nobody will just make this. So I got in touch with him and just sort of said, hey, I don't really know how we're going to pull this off, but like, do you want to do more of this? Can we, let's get together and see if we get along. And it developed from there. But yeah, it was basically just because I thought that there should be more weird, violent, naked animated films in the world, and I didn't know who else would do it, so we just did it. Yeah.
So you stepped up, and Doug Morano over on the chat mentions the cast: Lucy Lawless, Patton Oswalt. I think Richard Grant is in it. I mean, that's the voice actors are incredible. And all of their effort was just voice, right? They weren't like standing in as models for the rotoscope.
Yeah. So they were not. No, they weren't in the dusty warehouse here in Rhode Island where we shot the live action reference. No, they came on much later after we had most of the animation done and we could show it. Show them that it was real, that it was going to be a crazy, awesome thing. So that was much later.
Very good.
Yeah.
But it was excited though for the possibility of a sequel, because as Laird has mentioned, I know he's said on Twitter, like there's just nothing quite like this, and we'll be talking about this. I think the way folks talk about heavy metal or the Bakshi Lord of the Rings, 20, 30 years later, because
that's the hope. And thank you guys. I mean, the sequel script, I won't say anything about it except to say that it is. The original film was ambitious, and this one, like Morgan did the first draft, he really took the idea of like absolute maximalism as far as he could. So it's really, it's if we can pull it off, it will be even more special than the original. So here's hoping.
Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and take you off stage for the moment, okay. And then when we get to 30, we'll and they remain, we'll bring back up. But awesome. Ping us if you want to. Chime in on anything with Laird's stories.
Yes, I will, for sure.
All right, very good. And Edward, I will bring you back up shortly, sir. Thank you. Okay, so Laird, Occultation, of course, this won the Shirley Jackson Award for Best Collection in 2011. Mysterium Tremendum, one of its stories, won Best Novella. You mention here, actually, this is an inscribed copy, and you wrote in here, Greg, The Horrors of Love, Old Leech approved. And this really, as you've mentioned previously, I think on our last call, this the central theme here, the connector really between all these stories isn't some part of a monstrous metaphysical device or whatever. It really is about it's all about love and relationships. Between various characters in these stories. The book was published in 2010. I think you were still living in Olympia at that time, where many of these stories take place. And at this point, you had, before the book was, or as the book is being published, you've already enjoyed quite a bit of professional success. The stories that came out in the Imago sequence got I think a lot of good attention. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of a backdrop against which the stories in Occultation were written at this time in your life?
So a couple of things. One, yes, it did win the Shirley, and to this day, though, I'm very proud of it. But I would have voted for Stephen Graham Jones's collection that year, which was The Ones That Got Away. No. So I consider myself pretty fortunate, not only to be nominated or win an award, but just for everybody out there, I wrote the introduction to that collection, and it's one of the finest horror collections I've ever read. So
so many incredible stories. Father, Son, Holy Rabbit,
just the leading story. Werewolf Island. I mean, it's just it's spectacular, and shows him at his just absolute most powerful in that collection. But so a hat tip to Stephen. And as far as it being the doomed love, I will just say this: it's really ironic because I didn't know it at the time, but that collection came out early, like April, end of April in 2010. I think the street date was like July, but it came out early. And I was getting divorced about 2 weeks later, and I didn't know it at the time.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know what to say about the back. It was completely unexpected. And so maybe when I was writing those stories, my subconscious was trying to tell me something about what was going to happen to me. But no, at that time, I wrote a lot of those stories. I actually had written at least half of them after I had quit my day job and was trying to, basically we had a plan. It was a 5-year plan because we had enough savings. My wife at the time had gotten another really good job. It was better than both of our jobs combined.
Wow.
And so she said, yeah, let's, we have enough. Basically, you could do a part-time job, but you're set up to where we can just do this for like 3 to 5 years and see where it goes. And so I wrote a lot of those stories, against that backdrop. And it was simply an evolution from the Imago sequence, which is pretty much told from the point of view of very hard-boiled, male characters, and very much was inspired by my love of hard-boiled fiction of various types. And the characters in there fit a very specific archetype with very little variation. And so one of the things that I had learned over because it took me 7 years to write that, about 7 years to write that collection, is I had started evolving toward the end of it with the Procession of the Black Sloth, which was the last thing I wrote for it, which is very different from the other stories. Even though it's hard-boiled, it's in a really weird, much more contemporary style. And so obviously the next collection just carried on with that. And of course you have a much broader spectrum of personalities, gender representation, sexuality, the whole thing. And shifted away from cosmic horror in the sense that cosmic horror is still the beating heart of that collection as it is the beautiful thing. But the intrusion of more human elements that we can all, relate to. You don't have to be somebody who lived on the rough edge of life to appreciate it. You could be almost anyone and find something of commonality with some of these characters.
Strapato, I think, really is the maybe in some ways the outlier here in that it's absolutely horror, but there are no supernatural or preternatural or paranormal elements to it. And in fact, it was pointed out in the write-up of that story that Kenshi is like the opposite of one of your hard-boiled tough guy detective type characters. And yet maybe that's what makes it so, as multiple Redditors were commenting, maybe that's what makes it so terrifying. Like, this is really something that could happen to any of us. You're wrong place, wrong time, and you're not too careful, and you could be sucked into a really, really ugly situation.
Absolutely. That's actually, it's funny. That story, I think, is a precursor to, in what it's talking about, the message of the story, to Speak No Evil, which is very popular. And I'm doing a remake of it, but I don't want to give any spoilers to Speak No Evil. But there's a huge similarity in why the core thesis is really similar.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but boy, I've heard it's so very dark. It really does upset people, even among, and I run in circles of people who love horror films, and they are not easily disturbed, and that movie really genuinely disturbs folks.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to Strapato in a little bit because Edward throws in here real quick that he was very much reminded of the Hostel films by Strapato, Foreign Destination, murderers with butcher aprons and machetes and stuff. And there's it's very terrifying.
Right. We can bring that up again because I have some thoughts on why I did that. Yeah.
Well, you know what? We don't have to go in order of the stories. Let's just go ahead and take that on.
Well,
yeah. I was just going to say, the story, of course, was originally written for Ellen Datlow's Poe anthology, Poe,
Mm-hmm.
19 Tales of Suspense, Dark Fantasy, and Horror from 2009. Someone pointed out that Strappado and Amontillado have a little bit of ring to them. And I do wonder, along with maybe influences like Hostel and similar films, if there was a particular Poe story that you felt like the vibe really especially inspired you. I guess Pit and the Pendulum would maybe be one obvious connection there with the torture device.
Mask of the Red Death is actually
really okay. Yes, the parties,
and the color scheme. The Mask of the Red Death and the Casco Amontillado. Those are the two primary focuses, and and it is. Hostel was in my mind. I'm not a huge fan of that genre, but there are elements of it that are undeniably compelling, and so I wanted to, and and this is a precursor to eventually Swift to Chase, which has a lot of that kind of stuff in it, more psychological horror, but and more horror that you could imagine befalling yourself as you read it. But no, if you were to update Poe is not bloodless, is not clean. It's not. It would be pretty stark if you were to update Poe today. And I realized that Poe, I've said this before, that he doesn't get enough credit. I don't give enough credit. Poe just completely undergirds most of my nightmares and a lot of my subconscious yearning when I write horror. I really feel like I started reading Poe, as I think many of us of my generation did, very young. I started reading Poe when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I didn't realize what a profound effect he'd had upon my psyche until years later. After I wrote 30, actually, I started realizing, wow, Poe really does, not in style by any means, but the live burial and the descent into madness and the inability to trust your senses, and even when you are in control of them, allegedly, and also just the fragility of sanity in general. They were things that I had gleaned from, reading him all those years. And but it was so subtle. I was thinking, Stephen King, or Peter Straub, or all these other authors I love, Clive Barker, because there was, I came to them later, and of course they're fresher in the mind and they're more dramatic, I guess. But Poe really, I think, is to blame for a lot of what I do.
I don't know that it's my favorite story of Poe's, but it may be the one that has its hooks into me the most, which is the Telltale Heart, because it just has the voice to it that is so palpable, and it's not just telling an awful story or a horrifying story. It's creating the interior of a person's mind, which you bring up Stephen Graham Jones, and some of the characters that he embodies in his stories. The book The Least of My Scars, where you're following the internal monologue is that of a serial killer who's in the process of killing or doing other horrible things to people through the entire book. And Poe, really, with Telltale Heart, you get this whole "but why do you think I'm mad" kind of monologue. Is really, really tremendous. I did find it interesting that the story is Strappado. Of course, you can go and look up on, go look in Google, and you'll see illustrations of that. In the text, you actually come just to the verge of describing the Strappado arms behind your back being lifted up, but you don't quite cross the line of picturing people quite in that position. Was that why did you just get close to it but shy away from it? Not shy away, but not actually describe that final Strappado torture.
I don't think it was. I felt it was unnecessary. I think in most cases, the implication is far more potent than explication. And of course, here's the problem. When you write many stories over many years, you have to, unless you want them all to sound the same, you definitely need to. Sometimes you show the monster or the torture, and sometimes you don't. But I do think, in the abstract, suggestiveness is far more powerful. My readers have probably, just as febrile imagination as I do, and there's more of them. So I'll leave it to your demons to illustrate it for you. But and the other thing is as a poet and somebody who studies song lyrics, one of my favorite techniques, one of my favorite concepts with titles is that they are probably the most powerful tool that a writer has, or among them. Whether you're a lyricist, a poet, nonfiction, fiction, doesn't matter. That you can, but especially in shorter stuff where the publisher is not necessarily interfering with, when you try to write a novel for, say, Putnam or something, they're going to tell you, no, this book needs to be called The Gunman. This book needs to be called The Bank Heist. We need to make this simple. But for short fiction, you have, they'll give you rein. You can gallop off in any direction you want, generally speaking. And so I love titles that either tell you explicitly what's going on and it fits in with the story in some clever way, or is the key to solving the story or implying something about the story. And Strapato is sort of in the latter camp. There's a world of implication in that title that the word does not appear in the story. So, and there's multiple reasons. One is I do like the sort of the rhyming scheme, but also what the figurative and meta, and the literal interpretation of being in a rack kind of position is psychologically and physically.
Yes. Of course, a lot was made out of the fact that this is, in the art world. Christopher just commented that, he loves horror set in the art world that always seems ripe for horrifying tales for some reason. And there's a lot of commentary on the thread about, art versus protest, and maybe at what point does it even cross the line past protest and it just becomes evil. And one of our Redditors also, this is Sean in Glasgow, sends his best, is glad to hear you're recovering, and also asks, who are some of your favorite fine artists, in paintings specifically is what he mentioned. Just any thoughts there kind of on that, the art world is a place in which these stories can take place, and just, maybe a particular fine artist that you love.
My ex-wife was heavily involved. She's an art major, and I actually, for several years, when we were living in Seattle and she was still in school, I helped her with her art installations, and some of those were really macabre. I mean, she's a genius artist. Wow. And would use like actual. She did sculpting, like full bodies. I mean, I've been cast.
Oh wow!
I'd never want to do that again. More Vaseline. That's what I always say. If you ever do a full body cast, shave and then more Vaseline. You didn't use enough for sure.
Wow.
But she would put. I remember one of her sculptures was a 200-pound life-size human in a rocking chair, and she put a cow heart inside an actual cow's heart. So she did sculptures of. She found some dead seagulls and did a wax sculpture with them, embalmed essentially. Deliquescing fruit. I mean, you name it. And so that was kind of on my mind. I mean, I was there when she was doing this stuff, and I helped her, do some of the grunt labor, which there is a prodigious amount. But also, I study art a little bit, and there was, I think it was in Mexico, it was someplace where you could show things that wouldn't get arrested. But there was some artist that was going around posing dead bodies. They had like galleries of corpses, and people had volunteered for them. They weren't murdering anyone, but they would pose corpses. And there are people who crucify them. So I've seen pictures of this guy who crucified himself to a Volkswagen. The crucifixion is like one of the big art move. That's always like a grad student art trick. That type of thing. Yeah. But as far as some of my favorite artists, well, in general, I just I was actually thinking about that because I saw that earlier. And like, I'm a big Frazetta fan. I don't think that's a surprise. It's one of my very favorite. Leo, Corbin. In fact, I'm working on my antiquity series, and which I'll be releasing serialized stuff on my Patreon here starting tonight. But I think of Corbin so much when I'm writing that antiquity stuff. The heavy metal kind of vibe, and just the den vibe. It's absolutely spectacular. I like Patch Zurcher, who's worked on everything. I like JD Bush. Somebody probably a lot of you haven't heard of him, but I've worked with him in the past. And obviously, I like classic. There's some classic stuff I like Vermeer, but I'm not a huge connoisseur. Most of the art that I really, really enjoy is a lot of like graphic artists, modern cartoonists and stuff.
Yeah. I saw JD Bush. I know it had some illustrations he had done from Hallucigenia in particular that I saw out on, I think maybe his one of his art websites.
Yeah, he's worked on it. There's always just ups and downs of this stuff. There's like a business angle, but in the past, we've had plans for him to adapt Hallucigenia as a graphic novel, and so he's done great work, and I'm sure that we'll be doing more stuff together in the future. But just somebody I want to toss a shout out to.
Yes, cool, very good.
Really great work.
Yeah, well, what I saw was really, really neat. And Kat said, of course, so many of your stories would make incredible graphic novels. So, just like with film authors, I guess, man, we'd love to see some more adaptation of your work. I'm honestly surprised that there isn't like some kind of horror anthology series like Taboo was back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, I will say this. Ultimately, I haven't been involved in graphic novels because it just hasn't. The right opportunity hasn't presented itself, and also I'm really leery of, because the graphic novel world is they like to take your rights. Some of the companies do, and I've to your subsidiary rights. So so in other words, we have the movie rights now and things like that. Or we have the right to the character, and I don't want to see my stuff in panels that much. Yeah, however. Yeah. If the right situation comes along or the right company, I'd love it. I mean, it's one of my favorite art forms, a graphic novel. I have nothing but, like I said, I just list off a bunch of, I used to read Savage Sword of Conan, all those guys that worked on that. I mean, it's a love of mine. But I will say this, and it's about 99% going to happen. It just depends. If my Patreon goes well enough, one of the features that I'm going to add to it in the next 6 months to a year is, and like I said, this is completely dependent upon whether it's successful, is a comic, like a graphic, like either a comic strip or a bi-weekly graphic adaptation of my various antiquity stories.
Wow.
Like you would see, I don't know if I want to go full Sunday paper, but it would definitely be like something maybe a step above the daily strip that you get for like Prince Valiant or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say Prince. It kind of sounds like Prince Valiant.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of black and white initially because it's just so it's cost intensive because I'm going to pay somebody, well to do it properly, but I can't justify doing that unless for something like this, unless the Patreon's earning well, and if it is, then I want to do this. I want to have every couple of weeks, if not every week, have this strip start coming out, and it would basically adapt original stuff of mine, but also adapt some of my antiquity stuff that's out there already. I think it would be really wonderful to do that.
I think so too. And you mentioned Patrick Zurcher a few minutes ago. Have you seen like the stuff he's done for Solomon Kane?
Oh yeah, I follow him on. Like I said, I'm off social media, but I've been mutuals with him for years. I just adore his stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. He's dynamite. I know he's a big fan of yours as well. Let me see.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, for sure. I let him know that he was mentioned actually in your story, Swift to Chase, and he had not seen that. I just like did a little screenshot of the reference to him, and he said that he literally screamed, and his wife had to run in and see.
One more name I'll throw out there. I could name a bunch, and I apologize to any artists who are not I didn't name them, but Jeremy Hahn. Oh yeah. Hauntology. Oh my God, that guy is great too. So anyway.
Yeah. His stuff's dynamite. Absolutely. Let me see. Going through, I'm kind of now spot checking my list of questions. I think I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the story Occultation, because we did have several questions from our Redditors. So I'll just kind of bounce back and forth around this. A lot. Lieberkun said, kind of encapsulated it, saying, shoddy motels crawling with insects are terrifying liminal spaces. Deserts at night are terrifying liminal spaces. Add X, ecstasy, chased by booze, and that's how you get giant shadow tortoises and ass worms every time. Yes, I think this is a very different kind of story, one of your most potent. It seems that it's not really connected to your broader cosmic horror universe, or possibly it's completely connected if you squint your eyes and look at it a certain way. I know Edward made some, and I'll bring Edward on here in just a second to see if he has any particular questions or points he wants to raise. But Edward pointed out in his write-up, there's a book in the old motel room, and it's either like an old Greek or Byzantine Bible. Well, I'm looking at it thinking, maybe is it a copy of the Black Guide, or as the man in the story says, the worm crawled up my ass and there it waits. It's going to rule the world. And question was raised: is this one of the limbless ones that we see hinted at in the Men from Porlock? Do you see the story as completely freestanding, or is it maybe connected into your broader cosmology?
I think it's probably connected, but in the sense that it's not. I don't know that you can say, oh, it's an old Leech story or something like that. But in my mind, it takes place in the same universe or universes that I've established, and that's the one thing that I've really been working on with the various, how the stories thread together, is that I want some of them to thread together neatly. So you go, yep, same character, same idea. But I also think that gets boring too. And I really like the idea that that it blurs. If you look at it too hard, you start going, yeah, but that doesn't line up. Because here's the fact. I would spend more time making sure everything lined up and still get mistakes in my own mythology. It's far better just to go, no, things don't always line up correctly, and that's fine. It's fine for there to be inconsistencies and puzzle pieces left over. Now, one thing that's interesting is that story is directly related to Strapato, though, in the sense that I wrote Strapato and Occultation about the same time. It's one of those rare instances where I cranked them both out in a very short period of time. I was sick as could be. I had a chest cold and the flu, and I was working really long hours between my day job and writing. And so I wrote them over the course of a short, 3-week period or something like that. It was a very short period of time for me. Somebody like Stephen Graham Jones, it would have been lunch, but for me, it was, a couple, 2 or 3 weeks. And that's at a lightning pace for me. I mean, I've been known to work on a story that short for 2 months. I mean, that's, and the other thing is I was high as a kite on whiskey and honey and cold medicine the entire time. I was out of my mind.
It is kind of a fever dream, and the line between what's really happening there and what they are perceiving is very fine.
Yeah, I've never had. I mean, I've always drunk socially, but I've never really had any kind of problem that I know of with alcohol. Like after I got sick a couple of years ago, I've had almost no alcohol in 2 years. So I've never had an addiction to alcohol, but I was so sick for about a month that every evening when I went home, I would just dose myself down, and I was, I would go to work hungover, not just from whiskey, but from how much cold medicine and of various types I was high on all kinds of stuff, and coughing up blood. I mean, I was just really, I was just sick, and I used up all my sick days, couldn't take any more time off, and it was one of those jobs where you're sick all the time anyway. I worked in a classroom. And everybody was always ill. The kids were all ill. We were. It was bad. And so consequently, I wrote those in a fever dream, and I was up against the deadline. And so, I would just come home and work, even though I was half dead. And I wrote those stories, and that's how they're related. I was starting to feel better when I wrote Strapato. I was getting back to my normal depression when I wrote that one. So,
yes,
there you go.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can see. I think especially with Occultation, sickness kind of making its impression on kind of the internal monologue or the narrative that's going on there. Edward, I think you did the write up on this one, didn't you?
I did. So a question that's percolating in my mind. I read this thing 6 times because it's short, right? It's read it and read it and read it. Laird at the end, does the guy die? I
Yeah.
convinced myself that he died.
Okay. I'm just going to ruin this story for everybody. If you don't want, I don't like doing this all the time, but I'm going to do it with this one. All right. Earlier in the story, and this is actually a true story, where the guy is talking about I believe it was his uncle, who was a Marine and had been on shore leave in Longapo.
Yeah.
Well, this is from a story my dad told me about some Marine. He was in the Marine Corps in Vietnam, and those are gnarly stories, and they're stories my dad related from his time in the war. And he had a recurring nightmare when he came back, and it was about being in a kind of a brothel motel kind of situation, and near the water, jungle all around, and a place that he had been. And there was a woman next door, and in the dream, and she was, probably a prostitute, and she was taking off her clothes, entertaining a sailor, I think, in the dream. And then she took off her head, and out of her neck there was a beak, from a octopus. And he had that, from what I understand, multiple times. And she was holding her head, and her head would look at him, and then she would pull with her other hand, she would pull the blinds, and that would be these bamboo blinds or whatever. So I put that in the story. But when you get to the end, that noise you hear is his head falling off and hitting the floor and rolling under the bed, and that's the laughter. That's what's occurring.
Okay. You heard it here. We'll have to put spoiler warnings on the notes for that. I
always thought that was really obvious, but I guess it wasn't that obvious. But yeah, his disembodied head is rolling around under the bed, laughing at her.
I mean, I read it 6 times. I didn't know if it was the worm or some random murderer who had entered into. You just you look at it, and I was trying to figure it out. I thought the guy died, and that was contested on Reddit. Somebody said no, he didn't die. They were just high on drugs. But I convinced myself he was dead.
Well, that's the other explanation, that it's an unreliable narrator, and none of that. I never and that's why I don't like giving away too much generally. But in my mind, dream, head comes off, worm crawls up your ass, and is now running you like an automaton.
Mm-hmm.
Why you need your head? It could take your head off if it wanted. So that's what happens.
So things are not looking good for the woman in this situation, I think, at this point.
Because I guess we're past worrying about the guy at this point, for sure.
Yeah. That's amazing. Bad Wolf.
Bad Wolf. Hey.
There's Bad Wolf. He mentions, I enjoy the story because I think the story is both directly and coincidentally connected to 666. He mentions specifically because of some dark magic, but also something strange. The game Something Strange pops
something
up.
Scary, right?
Something scary.
Scary. Sorry, Something Scary.
Right.
Is in this and 666, and of course
Sure.
there's something similar in Tiptoe. I assume there's probably some.
It's
kind
also
of origin.
connected. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Oh, I was just going to say it's also connected spiritually, if not. See, a lot of my stuff is I would say, even if it's not directly connected, as in these characters now appear in this story or this plot carries over. I try to do something that I learned from Aikman, which is you seed something in one story, and then 3 collections later, that seed bears fruit in another story. But it's this weird osmosis kind of effect it's not necessarily from A to B and you get to Z. It's like you go from A to 9,300, but they're still somewhere in the same universe. And 30 is connected directly to, or in that sense, to both those stories. The nameless couples.
Yeah.
Right. Some of the stuff that's occurring. You're not going to, the plots don't overlap, but they could even be the same couples because we don't really describe them very much. So you don't really know. It could have been alternate reality couples, but they're, in my mind, they're all connected in some way.
Yes. A couple other quick questions about this story. Well, the one comment that kept coming up about the story Occultation was that dang tortoise. it has somehow freaked people out, for me too. I mean, like, it's a very distressing image, mostly I think because we don't see it, we don't directly see it, we don't know what it is. Where did this thing come from? A Kennelly says, yeah, what was the inspiration behind that creepy tortoise? It was so absolutely unsettling, and I won't ever forget it. And a lot of people kind of echoed that comment.
I've already ruined the story as much as I'm going to ruin it, so I'm not going to go. But I will say this, you know, the whole idea of something coming out of someone's neck and it's a beak, or maybe it's a beak-like thing. You know, who knows? There's some kind of imagery there that seems connected in a Lynchian kind of way. But that's all I'm going to say about that.
Understood. That's awesome. Thank you. And there was one other question. This is just about the M dashes you use for dialogue here. I think they're used in 30 as well. Mm-hmm. And I think James Joyce, of course, used that. Famously used that some in. I think you
lots of authors, relatively speaking, have used that or variations on that. The idea is not the M dash, but the using something other than non-standard punctuation.
Yeah. Cyberbono Technic, Redditor Cyberbono Technic, just said he expressed interest in that because he says he's a theater person, and it starts to actually read like a script to him, where the descriptions are very minimal, and then it's just like dialogue jumping straight out at you.
Yeah, and I did it more for myself. I mean, generally that's why I do everything. I do it for myself, and then I hope that what entertains or challenges me will entertain or challenge enough other readers that it works. But at the time, I was really trying to get away from Imago sequence in the sense of it being sort of this monolithic, and not like a mosaic, which switched to Chase later on as a mosaic, but like no monolithic, like no, we're telling the same story over and over again and from different perspectives, but we're really, it's like this note, we're just pounding on this note. I wanted this to be different stylistically in every possible way. But part of that was to challenge myself as a writer. I felt, okay, I've already done this sort of, cosmic horror, sort of traditional blue collar kind of a collection, gumshoes and dames and all that. This had to be, for me, to be interested in it, different. And part of that was to challenge myself to write at least 2 or 3 stories in it that were hard to wrap my head around. I'd never written anything without, traditional punctuation. And what I learned right away is that it put me in a different headspace. It always puts me in a different headspace when I read Cormac McCarthy or any of these other writers, European writers that do it. It becomes invisible very quickly. Yeah. It's annoying when you first, but it's like a pair of shoes that they're new, they don't feel great. Now you walk around in them for a little while, and boy, you don't notice them anymore. And that's how I felt. But there's still something going on in the back of your mind, and it puts you in a different. There's a certain estrangement. You have to focus on the text more.
Yes.
And one thing that I don't mess with my audience generally, except playfully, but I will punish you for not reading closely. In other words, I don't care if you skip a line of dialogue and the story no longer makes sense to you when you read another hour. That's not my problem. And I don't care at all. I actually am kind of like, then go back and read it again because it's there. It's there. Yeah. But that kind of messing with it wasn't just for, for fun. I felt like, no, I want you to focus. These are the 30 and 666 and Occultation. I really, really wanted you to have to lean forward and focus on it.
Reminds me of Petey, by T.E.D. Klein, where there's something going on, and you start to get the sense that there's something going on, and then it hits you with essentially the last line. And when I got to that, I realized I have really not followed this as closely as I thought I had.
I read it several times before I put it all together, and I was rewarded every time. So I shouldn't say punishment, but it's more just, no, then go back and read it again. That's what you need to do.
Yes.
It's good enough for me. You always see these threads on social media. Do you waste your time watching something over and over again or reading something? I'm like, waste your time. if it's worth reading or watching, you'll get something. You'll actually start to understand it after a few times the way you should. I don't care if it's really simple as a Buffy episode. There's something in it, if it's any good, that you didn't pick up the first 3 times you watched it.
Yes. Edward, anything else that you want to bring up about occultation? And I'm going to jump to Lagerstadt next, which I know you have some specific points you want to raise. But anything else you wanted to ask about occultation?
Not about occultation, no.
Let's go ahead and move to the Lagerstadt, and then we're going to jump over to 30 and bring Phil on stage to talk about They Remain as well. Let's see. A lot of the commentary on the Reddit thread for the Lagerstadt was about how how unlike so many of your stories the Lagerstadt is, and yet how very compelling it is. I think a lot of the discussion hinged on how much of Danny's experience is real versus what's a hallucination or some kind of experience from beyond the grave, etc. Is there a key in the narrative that helps us determine what's really happening and what maybe is just happening in our head?
A couple of things. It's funny because people will say that. They'll go, this is not like his other stories. But if you read, and that's fair, especially if you've only read like the first few of my stories. But I think at some point, if you read enough of my stories, you go, that's just a different line of story that Laird does. I do lots of stories that don't have hard-ass protagonists in them. They're the minority, but there's still quite a few of them. But I don't know that I don't see this is another one of those stories where I don't know if I want to ruin it by basically weighing in on whether you should interpret it one way or another. I think this one specifically is one that I think is totally fair to say that there's a camp that it's supernatural. Mm-hmm. And I think that's totally legitimate. And it's also totally legitimate to go, no, this woman she's suffering, basically has a break with reality, a psychotic break almost, various other breaks. And so this is what it is.
And Edward, I think you were in the camp, am I right? That was more along the lines of, no, she's really just suffering from a mental health crisis, I think, if I recall the comments correctly. But you wanted to weigh in on this story in particular.
Well, and when we commented on it on the read-along, I thought perhaps she opened a door and her experiences were from the beyond. She was participating in some occult rituals and talked to Dr. Green about that. Laird Craig had texted me. So in my real life, I'm a psychotherapist. I work in mental health. And so a lot of your stories really appeal to me because you write so much about that. Specific to this story, I felt that Danny's dissociative fugue kind of grief states, they seemed very realistic to me. I read it last summer for the first time, and it really, that seems like what would happen to someone if their husband and kid were killed in a plane crash. They would just be so bereaved that they would kind of disconnect. How did you get that information? How did you research that, or how did you write that in such a realistic way?
This is really strange because retroactively, it chills me that I wrote it. All those years ago, I wrote it in 2000. Came out, I think, in 2009 initially. Ellen Datlow published it in the Solaris Book of Science Fiction, of all places. And I want to say I wrote it in 2007 or 2008, somewhere there, so many years ago. And but retroactively, it chills me.
Yeah.
Because I wrote in 2007. I wrote it when I was writing, like when The Forest came out. So what's interesting about that is my hospital experiences from last year really were traumatic in ways that I'm just now grappling with. One of the things that I'm dealing with right now is that so many, I lost my former agent and very dear friend, Janet Reed, just last week. I found out about this, and when I was in the hospital, she and I, she was basically, we parted ways a few years ago. We were still on friendly terms, but we weren't talking all the time. But when I was in the hospital, she was checking in on Jessica. She really was fond of Jessica, and she made sure, because so many people were focused on my problems, that, she was one of the people who said, no, what about Jessica? How is she doing? Is she okay? Which was actually believe it or not, that was my biggest concern in the hospital, was worrying about her. And so Janet did. And, she passed away. I lost Weston Oakes, who was a friend of mine. There are several other writers that have passed away, and agents and friends. And I got to tell you, some of these were people that were, sent me get well cards in the hospital. And my God, I'm having a little bit of a moment because it doesn't sit right with me. I'm grateful to be here, but I'm also like a little bit emotional about, it doesn't seem right that these people who were just a year ago saying, "Hey, Laird, we're here if you need anything," are gone. It doesn't seem right. And I look back on Danny, and at the time I was modeling her mental state, partially with just, I'm a depressive. And so it wasn't that big a stretch for me to understand guilt about surviving, being the survivor, and also in her case, moving on with her life. That seemed something really, I had that after I left Alaska and left my dog team. And I don't mean to trivialize the human experience with animals, but for me, they're almost, as personally, I don't really just discriminate between those beings, and not in a meaningful sense, not when I'm lying awake at 3 a.m. And so it was easy for me to extrapolate. I thought it was easy. I tried to extrapolate that into how a person who had survivor's guilt would function. And let me tell you, I have a tiny dose of it compared to the character Danny, but I got it. In my case, I got it right because I find myself just being sick to my stomach.
I wonder about one comment I did want to bring up from Reddit. Redditor RoboCop did the overall write-up, which was excellent. And
they're all, by the way, you guys are all spectacular. The write-ups, the questions, I said it last time, but I'm blown away and humbled by the degree of, I don't know, scholarly, investigation and the integrity of the whole project. It really is an honor to have people take your work apart like this.
I've been thrilled with how much insight I'm gaining from reading from this editorial team.
Me too.
I mean, like one of the commenters was talking about comparing one of your stories to the Baudelaire, I think.
All right, yeah.
And then we have some philosophy, some philosophical pessimism being analyzed from the broadsword. I mean, no, they're really going into a lot of depth. So I'm hoping that these, as we go through the rest of the read along, that these will stand as kind of enduring materials for how to approach Laird stories. Well, there's a lot of approaches there.
I hope that somebody collects all this stuff.
Yeah,
because it's really well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm completely thrilled with it. And by the way, anyone who's joining us online or watches this, we still have the Croning and Swift to Chase that we're going to get through. And we are, if anyone's interested in doing a write-up on one of the stories from Swift to Chase, or we'll probably do the chapters of the Croning, we're accepting just a handful more members to the editorial team. So just DM me, reach out to me about that.
Greg, you also have, we have most of the beautiful thing that awaits us all, because Redfield went live today, and that's only the second story in there.
Right. Well, and those stories have been assigned to folks. So I'm just thinking for those stories that are yet to be assigned, then we're taking more Redditor folks to join our editorial team. But yeah, we've just dipped into the beautiful thing that awaits us all. And to me, I do think that maybe that's the most accessible book for folks to start on their journey to reading Laird's work. And I see that question a lot during this read along. Where's a good place to start? I prefer start at the beginning in terms of order in which they've been published. But I do think The Beautiful Thing is maybe a great place to start. Laird, do you have what do you tell people when they ask you?
It depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to someone who's conversant in the shorthand, like if I know a little bit about the background and what they maybe have a good guess at what they like, then I might venture to say start at the start, because you can't. It's harder to go back after an author progresses and enjoy the earlier stuff as much sometimes. I hope that I got better as I went, but it's a toss up at this point between Occultation and The Beautiful Thing. If it's somebody who does not. They want to try horror, but they that's not their bag. Definitely The Beautiful Thing. If they're horror fans, I usually say Occultation.
Nice. Jumping back to Lagerstadt for a minute. RoboCop points out how marginalized Danny is as someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis, and I think that was really a lot of the conceit of his write-up, that the folks in this position get marginalized, and she's not like some kind of a hard-boiled, I'm gonna put up my dukes and fight through to the cosmic end of whatever horror I'm facing. She is really struggling, and she's got someone, Meryl, who really cares deeply about her, trying to help her out. But it is a real struggle as a marginalized person.
Yep.
You also mention in here in Lagerstadt we see doppelgangers. We see doppelganger of Virgil and other potential doppelgangers. I wonder if this was influenced by your own experience that you've shared, I think in particular on the Lovecraft e-zine, about having a doppelganger of you apparently out there. Is there anything you'd want to comment on about that?
Right. I won't go into it too far just because it would take too much time. I could do a 20-minute talk about my doppelganger, but just in brief, I do have one or several. I've dealt with the situation in a very like macabre sense, like not just, oh, there's people out there that look like you. No, this is like wearing a patch, sometimes wearing the same clothes. I used to exercise all the time. I carried a heart, about the size of it. It's like a big steel heart, and it was painted bright pink, and people would see me with it. People I didn't really know. I mean, on and on. I mean, there's a lot of corroboration that people were seeing someone that looked like me, but wasn't me. And so that, of course, I've had a lifelong fascination because of that, since I was about 18 with doppelgangers. And I'd had nightmares going back to when I was a babe, like 6-7 years old, about family members who were not family members when you got up close to them. They looked like family members until you got up close. And so this idea of people that aren't people, or people that look like people you love, that goes way back, to childhood. And then it kind of seeped into real life. The other thing I'll say about Lagerstadt is that you'll notice that it's sensory heavy.
Blue shows up a lot.
Blue shows up a lot, and also just repetition of description, but just the density of description is overwhelming, and it was intended to be so, partially to mimic, her state, her hyperfixation, her perseveration on various aspects of her life, just her psychosis. That was, I like to just, sometimes I like to describe things in lush detail anyway, but this went far beyond what I normally do, and it was for a reason.
Thank you for mentioning that. I had wondered what kind of the blue reference was, and that makes a lot of sense. The last thing I'll just ask about this was the bone shard in Lagerstadt. It came from the Burgess Shale, possibly, which of course is where, like, we see the hallucinogenea creature animal. Yep. And also the Black Guide described in Mysterium Tremendum. It's the book shown, this from Mysterium Tremendum, the book shown in the dusty gloom of that aisle, and it radiated an aura of antiquity and otherworldliness, like a blackened bone unearthed from the Burgess Shale. Is there a connect? Am I reading too much into that? Is there a connection in some way, or it just happens to be just because it's the Burgess Shale keeps coming back in?
It might be connected. But I want you to also, and everybody listening, to also keep in mind that I have multiple. There's three things at least going on when you read a lot of probably any author's stories, but I can only speak for myself. There's the intentional, direct reference that recurs. There is the indirect reference that occurs, and then there's the accidental reference that recurs. The accidental being, oh wow, I sure like to use occultation a lot in stories, or whatever your tick is, And so I've tried to make a virtue out of just embracing my ticks. I like to have certain things, like lean on certain descriptions, or I lean on certain themes, fine. Instead of trying to excise them, you'll go crazy trying to excise that stuff from your writing. You go, wow, I have a lot of burials in my stuff. What do I do? No, you just embrace it. You incorporate it. That's part of your thing. That's your theme music. It enters the room before you, type of thing. So in a lot of these cases, I would say about 70% of the time, 80% of the time, though, it's not necessarily a direct reference, but it's the idea of something like eternal recurrence, that you could be, if you believe in reincarnation, you may be talking to somebody who is reborn, if you believe in that kind of thing, or that you maybe even knew them when they died and they've come back, but you're not talking to that person anymore. You're talking, there's some kind of resonance there, but you're still talking to a different person. And that's the idea, is that even when I bring things in like the same name, different character, the Burgess Shale gets brought up, a Black and Bone. It's more to harken back like a almost like a subliminal note, that I'm trying to pluck the strings of your subconscious in an oblique way to change your psychology, or to change your mental state, as much as I am trying to go, oh, this is connected to something else. To me, that's the most crude form of art, is the he. There was a sheriff that shot a dog in Derry. See, this is the same universe. No, that's fine. I do my share of that. We all do. I think it's far more interesting, though, when you hit these little notes that you're like, did I just hear that? What was that note?
Yes.
Oh, it made me think, and then but it's boom, it's gone. You keep moving.
Yes. Thank you. That's terrific. Okay, Edward, thanks. We'll bring you back up shortly, sir. And we are going to go ahead and bring up our special guest, Phil. Thanks for sticking with us for so long, man. I appreciate it. It
wasn't even that long. That was great. Okay, I had forgotten. I should have gone back and reread the collection, because I haven't read Strapato in ages, or Occultation in ages. I do want to say I agree. Somebody asked me recently where to start with your work, Laird, and I answered both basically the exact same way that you both answered. I was like, well, you should really start at the beginning, but if you're gonna if you don't have if you want to just sample, you should probably do Beautiful Thing. I feel like it's a really good entry point. But my favorite of the collections is Occultation, for sure. So yeah.
How did you first? I guess, what was your first Laird Barron story? How'd you learn about Laird?
My first Laird Barron story was Old Virginia, and I couldn't tell you how or why I read it. I really don't remember. I remember where I was when I read it, but I don't remember how it came to me, to be totally honest. And I thought that it was amazing, and then I didn't read. I sort of filed the name away in the back of my mind for a couple of years, and then I don't remember. I'm not that old, but I feel like my memory is just shot through with holes. Like I can't. like a couple of years later, for reasons that are lost to me, I was like, oh yeah, that Laird Barron guy. I want to see what he's been up to. And maybe it was connected to the first of the new batch of Necronomicons here in Providence, because I think Laird was a guest at that one, and I remember seeing you, Laird, on a couple of panels, and I think maybe that. But I feel like at the time I had already reread, or I'd already gone back and read Occultation and already read the Croning, maybe. Anyway, it's lost to me. It's just just a thing that happened.
Well, what when you came to the story 30 in Occultation, did you look at that and say, oh my gosh, this should be made to a film? Or were you thinking, man, I want to adapt something by Laird? Or, I mean, what was the connection between that story and I'm going to make a feature film out of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think...
because obviously it's an enormous investment just of time to even start off with trying to do an adaptation, just even writing it.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the time looking. I knew I wanted to make another feature. I knew, and I had certain creative boundaries, call them creative boundaries, in my mind as to what I wanted to try to do. And it was like, I don't want too many characters. I don't want too many sets. I want something that is, creepy and unsettling, and that may have been it. And to be honest, in terms of the first thing that I knew that I was looking for, and that story obviously ticks all of those boxes. But I think the other thing that it does, and this relates to what you guys have been talking about this whole time, which is that it is a story like the story of Occultation and also 666, and a lot of Laird's work that is that demands the reader pay attention to it, and if you don't pay attention to it, you miss it. And so I read it once, and I think the first time I read it, I was frustrated and annoyed by it, which is a weird thing to say, given that I then went and spent years of my life.
It's a very typical response. Trust me.
Yeah. Well, so my
ask Ellen Dallow.
So you're right, but then I was like, for whatever weird thing is wrong in my brain, I was like, I'm going to reread that story, and then I read it again. And then I was like, oh, that frustration and annoyance, I want to spread that around. I'm going to make a movie that's going to frustrate and annoy people as well. Welcome to the club, jerks. So, but I mean, honestly, like that was sort of the instinct, was that I don't approach every creative project this way, but for 30, because it's such a mysterious story, and because I had a hard time parsing it, even on rereading it, I sort of entered it like the adaptation. Again, it's a weird thing for a director and a screenwriter to say, but like I entered it not really knowing what I was going to do with it, or even like what the objective truth of it was. Like I thought it was more interesting for the movie, again, to be a question mark, just to be a question, full stop, but then also to like try to get people, as you sort of have been saying about the stories, to lean in and pay attention. And like it was funny, Laird, what you were saying, like it's in there, and if you miss it, that's your problem. That's a little bit how I feel about the movie too, is like there's a number of details in there that are there, and if you notice them, you notice them, and if you don't, they just sort of pass you by, and it doesn't land. But that was to frustrate and annoy people. That's why.
Nice. I love it. It seems to me, and having reread the story and then rewatched the film for I think the fourth time now, and it's so congratulations. It's a gorgeous film. You have two incredible actors pulling out terrific performances: William Jackson Harper, Rebecca Henderson, and there's just so many really cool things about it. And you and Laird and I have talked about the film before, but Sean Kirby, maybe he's the secret weapon here behind this, because it looks so good, and especially when you talk about the color scheme and things. Laird,
he's a genius. And let's not shirk Malcolm Mills, who plays I think the most important character in the whole movie is the helicopter pilot,
the secret star. He
captured, if you want to see that as an old Leech movie, that guy understands how a skin suit, old Leech, one of his children piloting a skin suit supposed to behave. I'll tell you that.
His big line here, the dissolution of civilization continues to pay.
I want to toss one thing about this in. Every evening we watch. We were watching Buffy and Angel, just as comfort. Like I'm eating dinner and we watch one of those, and then we're done. So now we're watching Arrow and Xena. We're just kind of going back and forth, just total. Very low common denominator, easygoing stuff. And we watch Supernatural. We're watching the whole 15 seasons all the way through, one episode like 5 nights a week. And I always say about bit actors that come on, they're on for 10 seconds to 5 minutes. Like one time I was on Supernatural, and some of those people, like you could just tell it was a production assistant or it was an actor who wasn't going to get another big job anytime soon. And they took that 5 minutes or that 30 seconds or whatever it is, and they just devoured the scenery. And they just made it their own. I'm like, one time I was on Supernatural. That Malcolm, he kicked all kinds of ass in his like a few seconds. I feel.
Yeah,
100% agree. He's really dynamite.
Yes.
And actually has I think he's a bit more present than the helicopter pilot is in the original story. He, I think, pretty much just wants to get out of there. But yeah, he's really dynamite. Phil, any just thoughts on the just the performances you got out of them? I assume you were probably pretty pleased with it.
Yeah, I was very pleased with it. I mean, they're hard roles to play because, Well, they're hard roles to play. Because it's a difficult and strange story, and also because of the particular way that I was saying that I sort of entered into the project myself, which is like it's not like I came in and said to them, play these characters this way. I came in and I said, like, we need to figure these things out, or like together as a sort of collaborative process. So I think I'm not sure if it was hard for them or not, but it was a lot of fun to watch them figure it out. I mean, there are, I'll say for Rebecca's performance, it was really interesting because occasionally she would say, should I play this one like super, super evil? So there are takes that are not in the movie where she's like very, very arch and very like quite obviously evil. We didn't use those because again, you want to maintain the subtlety. But yeah, I mean, they were all, well, I say all two of them plus Malcolm were really fantastic to work with. And just, I mean, it's hard to shoot an indie movie, which this definitely was. And it's hard to shoot an indie movie in the middle of the wilderness, which this was, in like weird domes, but they just really, they did a great job. Yeah. Rebecca's about to be in a Star Wars show, so I think she's an alien. I think I saw one screen still of her in like green, like fully green alien outfit. I'm not sure if she's a Jedi or not. I should probably email and ask her. I suspect she might be though, so that's pretty exciting.
I caught her in Werewolves Within as well, the Josh Rubin film. She's quite entertaining in that. She can play a very kind of like aloof, but there's something really deep going on inside character quite well.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
I feel like having read the story and rewatched the film, that murder and kind of the natural chaotic order that are not conducive to human flourishing has been present in this place for eons here in the setting of this story, of this film. So that nature becomes a character, or its characterization is crucial to the story. What was your strategy for trying to represent nature as such an imminent threat to their characters' lives?
That's a great question. I mean, so I'm gonna bring up Sean again. So Sean shot the film, Sean Kirby. So we would approach every scene that was an exterior sort of like one develops a rapport with your creative partners on a film set, because it's a highly tense, compressed circumstance, and you have to be creative quickly. So when we were choosing shots, the thing I remember saying to Sean, and I don't remember if it was his turn of phrase or my turn of phrase, but it became our turn of phrase, was like, he would say like, Phil, do we need to leave space for the other in this shot? And I'd be like, yes, Sean, there needs to be space for the other. So a lot of it, and I, again, the specifics of what exactly was meant by that is a little bit hard to articulate, but I think basically what we were saying was that the way that the camera needed to be used was to frame the action in ways where nature was felt in a way that you might not otherwise feel it in way you might normally frame shots. And I mean, there's a couple of, I'm trying to think of specific examples in the film. I mean, there's late in the film, there's a couple of dialogue scenes where they're having an argument outside, and there's a very conscious decision to frame her in the middle of the shot in a way that you probably wouldn't normally frame a human being if you were doing that sort of shot over shot. So it was also trying to be subtle about that. Like, we weren't trying, we weren't doing like Sam Raimi extreme push-ins. It was everything was intended to be sort of like in a cruel of unsettling ambiance that you might not be able to put your finger on. But honestly, it was, verbalized by me to Sean, but it really was Sean's eye figuring out like what the hell was meant by leave space for the other. Was like, should we move it a little bit more this way, a little more this way? I also just there was a shot, it's in the film, there's a scene, it's an interior scene where she's talking about a dream she's had. And I remember when we got into the, and she's right at the camera, and at a certain point actually speaks directly to the camera, and he's moving around behind her. And we had framed that shot, we got into the post-production process, and we'd originally framed it in a way that was like so wackadoodle-doo. Like, I think it was like just here or just here. It was really crazy. And and we corrected it because of the way that it corrected it slightly, but it's that kind of stuff. Like you're looking for like visuals that are off enough that they, insert themselves in the subconscious a bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. There's just a couple of small things here I wanted to ask you about. First of all, like almost the very first shot is a close up of the man of William Jackson Harper, and you get a look at his eyeball, and having watched it again last night, it looks like you're seeing the curve of the horn in his eye. Am I reading that right?
Yes, that's 100% correct. Yeah, you can see the horn in his eye there. Yep.
Okay, so there's and on our previous call or conversation about this, both you and Laird mentioned that there was a similarity in, of course, the horn doesn't show up until like about two thirds of the way through the film, but both you and Laird mentioned about the kind of non-linear process of creating the story, both the written text and the film itself. I guess, do you want to, Phil, just kind of share again, like how you took the text and tried to put it into an order?
Yeah, so I printed the story out, and then I made it like I'm sure I described it much the same way last time. I made it like a kindergarten craft project. I sliced it up with scissors and started to organize it and got rubber cement and started to paste it into a notebook. So I would paste bits of the text on one side and leave the other side open for like notes. And then and in doing that, sort of reconnected, I'd like parts of one scene might belong in another scene, parts of something like a mood here might fit a mood there, basically. So I did that whole thing. And once I had that done, then I moved to like took that basically and transcribed it into screenplay form to get the first draft of the script, and then obviously like shoot it over a number of times, and then shoot it over another number of times in the editing process. It was, like any movie, it's either, what do they say? Every movie is made 3 times or something, like once in the script, once in the shooting, and once in the edit, and maybe 4 or 5 times, honestly. So, but yeah, it was, but there wasn't, it was not a standard screenplay writing process. Like at no point did I say to myself, oh, what's the first act break? Like, what's the second act break? What's the, like, there was no, and that was by design. Like I didn't want to, I didn't want to write it that way because I felt like that would shave off the edges of the story and make it feel, like something that you might have seen before. And the goal was to make it, something strange and weird and, frustrating. a very unique experience. And Laird, it sounds like that was actually not too dissimilar to how you wrote the story to begin with.
What I find interesting is despite the fact that Phil and I talked about what he was going to do prior to, he had sent me some material, but he had no idea, from what I recall, exactly how I wrote the story. And what's funny is my process was really similar. I obviously every writer probably rewrites stories or moves chapters around or has go, oh, this should have gone earlier in the book and redo it. That's not unusual, but this process was because while I was writing it, I would take whole sections of it and put it in different order. And then when I was done, like I was basically ready to send it off, I said no. And I went back through and I took whole sections and put them in different places. And what I realized and then did very little rewriting to connect it. I simply just moved things around. I realized what I had. And what I had was a dream, was a nightmare, just a little more material form of a nightmare, like a living nightmare or a waking nightmare. And so, yeah, when I heard about how he did it, I went, it was infectious. There was something infectious about the story.
Yes.
Psychologically.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I just brought that point up because I realized, hold on a second, we're looking at the horn in almost the very first shot, which I thought was really interesting. A couple of other really small.
I have that horn.
Wait, you have that?
There are 2. I have one too. We both have.
I have right.
Yeah,
Can you tell us just this was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Can you tell us a little bit about the creation of the horn, and in particular, what was it based on?
So the horn was made by a really talented artist and really big Laird Barron fan, Gage Prentice, who is a sculptor here in Providence, who I met in the process of making the film. We didn't know each other prior, and it was based on. I mean, I wish Gage was here because he would tell you. He's very detailed in his process. I mean, I think dug up, not literally. I wish I could tell you old skull photos. I don't know exactly what it's based on, to be totally honest. But he did a fantastic job. I mean, they're not. It's not heavy. It's a pretty light. It's like a foam. Again, I'm gonna totally fumble what it is, but it's like there's a foam. It's a foam base, and then I think resin on top of it.
That's what it feels like. It's solid, but it's light.
Yeah, solid but light.
The close-ups of it, I mean, it looks like horn material that's been laying in the ground for a long time. It's pretty kind of gnarly looking. It turned out really, really well.
I don't know how your horn looks these days, Laird, but mine in the backyard has gotten a nice. It looks even better now. It's all weathered and the birds.
I've had mine leaning up against a tree for the last 6 years.
However many years, yeah.
Yeah, or 7 years almost. Yeah, and it's going to move to the new place, and we'll figure out where I'm going to put it.
Yeah,
probably someplace to scare the neighbor. I'm thinking. I've already got plans that.
You know what? When you move to your new house, so I have the skull too, right? I have the giant animal skull, and my wife won't let me hang it on the outside of the house. So Laird, if you get your guy and you want to hang a giant animal skull, let me know. You can have it.
In our neighborhood, there's a Jehovah's Witness temple, so I'm thinking, this might be really handy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yep.
We'll be ready for you.
I'm an ambassador.
Oh my gosh. A couple other things I saw in there. This is around about 17 minutes into it. The male character comes upon the whole skeleton of a small animal, which I don't recall being in the text of 30, but I sure do recall that being in stories like Hallucigenia and I think Bulldozer as well. Was that maybe a little bit borrowed from other Laird stories?
I think it's in the story, actually.
Is it? Okay. All right.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to stump me once again on my own movie adaptation process. I don't remember. I can tell you this: that tiny animal skull was a real pain in the ass. To even more, like big skeleton was fine. The little skeleton was difficult, and that scene was I just remember it being a difficult scene to shoot for whatever reason. I was never quite 100% happy with it, but. So I don't remember. I don't remember if it's in the original. I don't remember where we would have pulled it from.
I'll have to go back and I'm sure it is there in the text. Yeah. Another thing I noticed was about close to the end when he finds the downed chopper and gets the walkie-talkie and he starts making the squawking noises and stuff. But then you can hear this. It sounds like the voices in it are saying "We love you," and that took me to the broadsword. Though also it may also be in 30, and I'm just not remembering it. So
that's a good question. Once again, should I have my research later? Do you remember? I don't remember if it's.
No, this is that. But that was if I recall, I haven't read 30 in a long time. It's funny because I actually erased from my memory. I have to go back and look at people quote my stuff to me. I go, who wrote that? That's great. But,
I'm a genius, I guess.
Genius, pure genius. But no, I'm pretty sure that you added that actually, because this is what I'll say about the script that I read, and of course watching the film, because I can't just watch a film anymore. I'm always, whenever I watch it, I see the screenplay in my mind. I'm like, okay, this is probably what they all look like on paper. It's just so close to the original, and the dialogue that Phil came up with, I had to double check, and I had just written the story 4 or 5 years before that to go, wait a minute, did she say that? Like, no, he changed some stuff and added stuff, but it was so seamless that he imitated how I wrote that expertly.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't. The only thing I know specifically that I remember adding is when she says, I he says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm standing around thinking about death." Because I remember writing that line. I remember standing in front of my refrigerator thinking about death, eating cereal, and I was like, "Oh, I'm just standing around thinking about death. I'm going to go put that in the screenplay." And then occasionally still, occasionally still, I find myself standing around thinking about. Just the other day, I was like, "Oh, I'm doing that thing again," like you do. But yeah, the walkie-talkie thing. I remember adding it, in post when we added it all in. And I think
there was a radio scene in the story, but it was in the habitat, and I don't recall. Like, there was some conversation, but I don't recall putting anything about that was that sinister in it. Yeah. It was more. There was a little bit of dialogue, but it was slightly different. So I like this.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's one of the goals of a film, is to reinterpret the original. I think that this is more of a science fiction horror film than what I had written.
Right.
We talked about it before. I melded like 5 or 6 genres, and I mean, science fiction was definitely in my mind. That's why the habitat's the way it is. But Phil just kind of foregrounded. He said, "Okay, I'm going to take the science fictional elements of it and bring that, the phase 4 kind of elements, and bring those forward." Which I really, is this even on Earth? Question. Yeah. And I found that to be really effective. I liked it a lot. I also liked the idea that because it wasn't available, because obviously the story was based on Spawn Ranch and kind of high desert, or at least more sparser, drier terrain. In my case, Western or Eastern Washington. The fact, I thought it worked really well, though, transferring it to a setting where basically a temperate setting that changes. I thought that was another great way to interpret, and it just let me realize that this is a really good basis for a story, one that can be taken out of it, that works even if you take it out of its original element and put it somewhere else, because the core of the story is strong enough that that's the important part. The trappings, the setting, that kind of, the accoutrements are are important, but they can be interchanged. And I think that a temperate setting did work for you guys quite well.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think so. I mean, we tried. I don't know if you ever talked about this last time. We tried to shoot it, and I was experienced enough at the time to know this was a bad idea, but we tried to do it anyway. We tried to shoot it in chronological order, specifically because we were hoping the leaves would change, over the course of the filming, and they didn't quite. I mean, you can detect it a little bit in the movie if you know that that's what you're looking for, but of course, then in the re-editing process, that kind of got screwed up too. But yeah, we were very much trying, as we were saying, very much trying to make the location, its own character with almost its own motives and its own way of working, if that makes sense.
It does, and really it is in the last, certainly after the halfway mark, and mostly in the last third, where the richness of the autumn colors are coming out, and you get the sense that like he's kind of on his way out here, like we're heading toward the end of his story, at least in terms of the scope of the film. I also want to mention that I think the boldest decision you make, to me, is clearly the end. You do see Rebecca Henderson's character down in the fox den, or in the coyote den. In the original story, there's someone down there with them. We don't know who it is. There is a very mysterious line there. It's in the original text where it says, her tongue went into his ear like the worm into the apple, which, for a Laird Barron reader, that's going to bring up some connotations of, like, from the story Proboscis and something like, is there some kind of is this like, are we reaching into that insectoid world, or is it just a similarity there? I don't know, Laird, if you want to respond to that.
All I can say is, let's go back to Occultation and what we're talking about in Occultation.
Yep.
The worm that rules once again, it may not be a direct tissue link, but it's a note that recurs.
Yes.
I believe in the primordial. I believe in, it's just like when Edward was asking earlier about how did you come up with, and it's a great compliment, when someone who works in the mental health field, says, hey, you got this right, or this is my experience, this is very realistic. you know, and I don't really go for realism in my stories. I go for immersion, and I go for, you know, I want to take you on a ride. As long as you're immersed, that's fine. But that is a compliment. But it goes to show that what goes on in our subconscious, we don't always. I figured out enough to know I don't know what these strings are, but if I pluck them, I get the twitch in the hand or the foot or the blink of the, you know, the blink of the eye, the rapid eye movement, and I can reliably do that. And what I found is it does not rely upon a direct. It's not a direct connection. It can be this completely. It's the idea of the science of the feet. There are nerves in the feet that affect your hearing, allegedly, or your eyesight, or you can have an embolism, or, you know, whatever. If something's wrong with your foot, there's something wrong with your back.
Yep.
That's a far more direct link than even what we're talking about with art. And I learned that from art. There's art that just shouldn't work, but it's like Phil says, you go home and you're annoyed and you're like, I want to understand this. You want to make, it's like this dog that you want to make friends with. It's not a friendly, this animal just wants to bite the crap out of you. It just becomes this obsession, whether it's dominant, you know, this human dominance over your surroundings, or whether it's some other indefinable thing, but you just have to make friends with this dog. I think art's that way too. Sometimes you just want to make friends with it.
Yes. And jumping back to the film version, though, of the end, Phil, with you having Rebecca Henderson's character actually come in, and then the line that's definitely not in the original story, she says, "Did you come to say?" She says to William Jackson Harper, who has been hit in the face with acid. He is in really, really poor shape, and has wandered for whatever. Is he following after her? She's been dragged off by cultists, or does he just not know where is he? Is he completely out of his mind? And he goes down into the coyote den. And she then comes into view and wanders up to him and says, "Did you come to save me?" Throws her hand around his mouth. "Did you come to save me or to join us?" And it's just like suddenly, wow, all the hints and pieces and questions as to what is she really doing. Of course, when she throws acid in his face, you know, she's up to no good. But then now, like, it really, to me, suddenly encapsulates everything, the whole question of her part in this film. I also noticed how this is around a 56-minute mark. She shares this story so innocuously, talks about how much she hates her parents. She doesn't like her dad's just kind of gross and old. Her mom gone, you know, died, and she doesn't really like her anyway. Her stepmom's even worse. And she says it's terrible to be alone. And I just like, oh, hold on a second. She's not alone. She found a new family, the family apparently, or something like that. Really made that connection there. And I can see that being one of those lines that maybe she gave you a range of it, but you stuck with the one that just seems so innocent. But then I realized, oh my gosh, that's a huge, huge clue as to what her motivation, or as to, what's really going on with her.
Yeah. Thank you for noticing. Yeah. I mean, there is a what am I trying to say? It's a very strange movie, as I knew as I was making it was strange. But another version of that movie is the cult shows up, and there's a cult, and maybe it's supernatural, maybe it isn't, but it's all everything that is off screen in They Remain would be on screen if it was a different film.
Yes.
And I just thought it would be so interesting, and I probably said this last time we talked about it, to make a film where this to sort of speak metaphorically, the central shape of what's going on remains only a shadow, right? Like you have to pay attention to what's said and what you're seeing to sort of put these things together. And I think even still, like it is my interpretation of the film that might be what's going on. What you've laid out, it also might not be what's going on. I think that, like, to me, the key line of the whole story, and I'm going to probably misquote it, and it's in the film too, is when after he's come back and been poisoned. I don't think she's put acid in his face yet, but she says something to the effect of, like, you have no idea what this is. Like, she doesn't, like, there's no way really to understand. So there's that line. The film works around that as its core thematic a couple of ways. He also says earlier in the film, or not that much earlier, like, the world is wide and unknowable, and none of us ever really knows anything. Like, two different versions of the same thing, but it is very much to me what that movie is about, is that it, you can detect hints of what it might be about, but the film is never actually going to show you what's at the the shape of the thing or the real it's never going to shine a light on the thing that's at the center of it.
If you can recall when you read the story,
yeah.
I'm sure you've read the story many times, but was your interpretation of the story that, yep, that is the woman scientist down in the den, or did you look at it and say, we don't know, but I'm going to decide that it is, or maybe he's hallucinating it, but the way he experiences it is her down there?
So I don't remember the first time I read it what I thought, and nor do I remember at what point I decided that it should be. But trying to piece together my train of thought, I felt that, if it is, it's so much a film about the relationship between the two of them. She almost has to be in it, because she almost has to be there to like to round that circle, right? Like you need to, like she needs to be there. And I will say also that last line, "Did you come here to save me or to join us?" Was, and this happens in a lot of my movies. Laird and I were just talking about this in terms of Spine of Night. I didn't write that line until well after the movie was shot. That line's ADR. Like I didn't
Really?
Yeah, I don't remember what she said, or she didn't say anything at all. But it is that was added much later.
Interesting. Because it's creepy as heck, and it's really, really a terrific line.
Yeah, and I mean, I quite like it, because I also think it pokes at this idea of sort of like a masculine hero, like that he would be thinking that he's going to go save her. Yeah. Like, if maybe there's nobody to save her from, or maybe she wants to be there, or maybe it as you're saying, it sort of encapsulates the mystery of the thing, I think, pretty handily. So I'm pretty happy with that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Laird, any just I guess observations as the guy whose work was adapted on the end product?
No, I just appreciate it more and more, actually. Like, I was always happy with it from the time I read the treatment or the kind of an initial script, the draft. I knew the story was in good hands, because you never know. It's Hollywood. You don't know. You're just happy to have something made, and that's helpful in a lot of different ways. But I was lucky that that Phil was the one who did it, and then Kirby, DP. I mean, I just felt like I really lucked out on this, and as time has gone by, I've seen it like 3 times. I've watched it a couple times, and then I've probably seen it 3 total times since then. And just as time goes by, and my perspective starts to shift on life in general, I find myself being even more appreciative of like the whole how it was shot, the acting, the aesthetic, and the principle behind it. I very much feel like it's an enduring. I think it's low key, and I think it will be talked about more as years go by. Like I've said that about Spine of Night. I think Spine of Night's a bona fide classic, but I think that this is this quiet little number that, as we look back on it years from now, go, that was a really good movie.
I can't think of a single film adaptation that more faithfully represents the feel of the original story than They Remain, and it's really incredible for that. We were talking about titles earlier, and on our previous conversation, Phil, you'd mentioned that They Remain was not, that's something that kind of came about at some point during production, but that was not your original title for it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true. Yeah.
I
quite like it as a title. I think it is I like that it also, in its way, presents a possible answer to the movie. Like, not to say too much about it, but I've always liked that about it, that it's sort of, it has a horror ring to it, but it also might, provide another interpretation of the film in a certain sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that you had mentioned in our previous conversation how much you don't like titling things, just how much of it's just not a fun process for you. And Laird loves titling things. Mm-hmm. So I found that entertaining there. And Phil, last question for you. If you just knowing some of other, Laird's other works, being familiar with his oeuvre, would if you had a great, a commensurate budget, an appropriate budget, is there another of his stories that you think this one really ought to be adapted next?
That's such a hard question. I mean, I've said since I made They Remain that I would love to make The Forest because it's because it ties directly to They Remain, and it would be fun to it would be a really fun one, and I think it would require a budget to do it properly. I mean, there's so many that would be great. Honestly, listening to you guys talk about Occultation, I was like, oh, maybe I should do another 2-person in a bedroom movie. Maybe we should just like go do it again. I mean, I love Hand of Glory. Sort of big. I think that's great. Broadsword is great. I mean, there's too many. It's too hard a question. I can't answer it appropriately.
I completely understand.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Phil, so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna move you. Yeah, I'm going to move you off stage, and if you want to say anything else, certainly we can bring you back up. Or if you feel like you want to drop off, that is totally up to you.
I think I'll probably drop off because it's almost my bedtime because I'm an old man. Yeah. So
good night, man.
Very good.
Thank you guys so much.
Appreciate it. Okay, I would like to talk. I know we're getting real close to the 2-hour mark. If we can get you just a few comments on Mysterium.
Yeah, I want to get everybody's questions.
Awesome, great, thank you. So Mysterium Tremendum, our Redditor Chicken Dragon 123 did a write up, and man, it's excellent. He notes the parallel threads of cursed knowledge in the story, both the friends using the Black Guide to seek out this dolmen that should not be in the vicinity of Mystery Mountain, but also Willem wants to know about his lover Glenn, his kind of secret past. He's finding out that he's been keeping secrets from him, including his relationship with Tommy the occultist. So you've got that kind of cursed knowledge thing going in tandem there. But the Black Guide, the Mordoror de Caliganus, I'm totally butchering that, I'm sure. He notes that it can be, translated as the Black Guide, but also he looked up some other possible translations. I control the darkness, and to guide or control the dark. Based on that, he kind of postulates as to the nature of the Black Guide. He gives 3 options. He thinks, A, it's a guidebook meant for the children of Old Leech. B, it's a lure for maybe foolhardy human occultists to go to places they shouldn't go. Or C, it's a tool of ascension. Can you just kind of recap like the origin of the Black Guide? Because I know it also involves some conversation with John Langan and Paul Tremblay. And there's quite a story behind this. Can you give us a little bit of that backstory on how it was created and your thoughts on the purpose of the Black Guide?
Right. I think there could be something to all 3 of those descriptions. I think it's another one of those things, though, that I don't necessarily want to discourage anyone's opinions about it. And obviously, if I weigh in and say, "Oh, it's this," then that ruins it for some people. So I'm going to avoid that. However, and I think there's some really great interpretations. I have my own idea what it is, but I also would say, because I'm not trying to be coy, that sometimes words have 2 meanings, as the famous song goes. That's sometimes they have 3 meanings, and that it doesn't have to be just one thing. There could be multiple. Life is complicated, even fictional life. The way that it came about was I was having a discussion at ReaderCon, and I want to say it was 2006 or 2007 probably, and somewhere around there, and drinking a lot of scotch with the boys. It was there was a bunch of us there, but the primary conversation started when John Langan, and John Langan is to blame for Old Leech to a certain degree. Some of these other things, we've swapped ideas back and forth. I got the title for The Beautiful Thing from him. It was a title that he had gotten somewhere and he decided not to use it in a story. And I said, "Hey, can I have that? If you're not using it," he goes, "Sure." And
the wide carnivorous sky,
right? That's
one of your stories.
Yeah, that's a phrase that he got from Caitlin Kiernan, and I which I didn't know, and I got from him. But the point is that he was going to call a story Bloom, and he ended up calling a story Bloom, which is one of his bigger stories. But it was initially going to be called The Beautiful Thing That Awaits Us All. And I said, hey, I like that. That would really fit the collection. So anyway, but the Black Guide was and an old leech originated from on School Island. The story of his, there's a scene in there where the anthropologist, I believe it was an anthropologist, was looking at like old pictograms and things, and there was a worm, like a worm-like shape, and that was it. That's all. It was just this tiny little mention. I said, hey, can I? Because we were occasionally mentioning each other's work, Derleth Lovecraft circle style.
Mm-hmm.
Can I borrow that? And he said, sure. And so that's where old leech. I was like, well, what's scarier than a worm? Lovecraft did a worm, and somebody else did a dragons and toads, and I know, leeches. I hate leeches. We've talked about those. So anyway, the Black Guide, similar thing. He was telling a story about he and his wife Fiona. I think they were overseas traveling, and they found a guidebook tucked in. They were, it was like an almanac style. Actually, it was less of an almanac as I reimagined it, but it was like a bicyclist handbook. Go here, stop there. The farmer over there will put you up. And Don Tumasonis, actually, the late Don Tumasonis, had written a lot of stories about bicycling across Europe and Greece and places like that. So we were talking about him. And I said, wouldn't it be funny if this guidebook it was a joke? They kept showing up in different places and then Paul was like in different forms, And so we each vowed to start writing some stories and not tell anybody, but just randomly put this book in our stories, and then people could go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And that's really what's happened with more me and John than anybody else, but that's kind of what's happened with our stuff over the years. There's the obvious stuff where you're like, Laird's referencing something from John or vice versa, like the book. That's pretty obvious at this point. But little things, we do these little, almost insignificant details that are direct, subtle references to the other guy's work that, unless you're a big fan of ours, you would never notice. We wouldn't want you to. But that's how that came about.
That's really cool. There are a couple of other just small elements in the Mysterium Tremendum that popped out to me, and one was this character Rose. I think we might have a little bit of a Olivia Llewellyn stand-in the form of Rose there, being from Ellenberg. And am I totally off base there?
No, she's not a stand-in for. She's actually a stand-in for a dearly departed friend of mine named Jody Rose.
Oh, okay.
Passed away a few years ago. I think she was a friend of many of us. She was a big-time fan. And she was a friend of mine. We never met in person, but she followed my work, and we corresponded since like 2007 or 8.
Wow.
Until 2020. And, I still don't know the circumstance of what happened because I'm not in contact with her family. From what I understand, she was sort of estranged from her family. So it's a really tough situation. But yeah, I put her in that story. If it's not her, but and of course the reference is partially to, obviously, it's to Olivia because of her famous story, which is the first story of hers I ever read. But so that's going on there. I mean, I do stuff like that all the time, mini Tuckerizations. But
yes.
I just I thought it would give her a kick to put her in the story as a villain.
Absolutely. The four protagonists in the story are all, of course, facing aging. They're not like vigorous college hunks anymore. They're in pretty good shape, but they're facing aging, and here they are kind of coming into this conflict with the return of Tommy, who's Victor is in really terrible shape by the end of this. But it seems like if they were to, I guess, give themselves over in some way to the children of Old Leech, they could actually gain some sort of longevity if they were willing to do that. So I kind of wonder if that sort of tension between what they would like to have, including the cursed knowledge and maybe eternal life or something like that, or eternal vigor or lifelong vigor. If maybe the children of Old Leech as an end, a potential end for one or more of them, is kind of being played together in this tension.
That could be. What's really happening is intentionally nebulous. We the one thing we know about the children of Old Leech, and this is very specifically, one of those stories, one of the first ones. They like to mess with us.
Yes.
Like messing with humanity is as much fun as that's their TV essentially. So we're live action role playing with humans, but so there's hard to say what you will or what you won't get. We do know that you'll get to it in the Croning, but some people are offered eternal life. That there's different stages of it. There's full on, you're not you anymore. There's the hybrid you. I mean, that goes back to the Imago sequence, though, which is a slightly different theme. But it's the transhumanism, the idea that there are multiple stages, and that you become less attached to humanity or less human as you go, as you ascend to godhood. You would leave, as you lose your the physicality of being a human being or anthropomorphic, you would by default or extension, your mind would change as well. And so we don't really know what they're really offering. Are they really offering something? Are they going to take it away? We just know that they're messing with these people. And one of the themes that I play with is it doesn't really matter that you're a pawn. And so whether you get something out of it or not, you're still just being pushed around a board to some degree.
Yes. And jumping
just like it worked.
Yeah. Yes. And jumping over to the broadsword, very much the same situation for Pershing. It's interesting that he and Tyrone Slothrop did our write-up for that, raised some excellent points about philosophical pessimism, in particular, kind of whether free will is an illusion. I mean, Pershing certainly seems tied to the broadsword. He goes and sleeps over at Wanda's place a little bit, but he doesn't seem like he can escape it. And then here are the children of Old Leech, who've infested this place and are toying with him and with other people, especially that poor child, Eric, I believe is his name.
Yep.
I wonder if Pershing maybe feels stuck there because he abandoned Terry Walker in the woods back in the early 70s when he saw the children of Old Leech carrying Terry away, and Terry is kind of back to torment him to some degree there. But I wonder if there's just kind of a sense of inescapability and being just a cog in the wheel or just kind of being there.
To some degree, there's the obvious stuff, being a cosmic, or just being a horror story, right? And also a cosmic horror story, eternal recurrence, the inevitability of time, the fact that the children of Old Leech and the transhumans in the Imago sequence, like Lusitania, can step outside of time. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something. It doesn't matter what universe you're in. The very powerful beings don't operate. Time doesn't operate. Or they're either manipulated or they exist outside of it when they want to. The time is like a finite, possibly even linear kind of thing that they can. It seems like a ring to us because of how they operate, but who knows what it really is. It could just be a flat line that they can step over, like, drawn in the sand. Who knows? But the idea, though, of the broadsword, his guilt, Pershing's guilt, that's sort of part and parcel with the entire theme of that collection. I mean, it's in a lot of my stuff, but it's at the forefront because do you ever escape your past, providence? Do you ever, there's that famous song, I'm slipping on the title, but essentially where you end up, the singer says something to the effect of, where you end up depends a lot on where you start. It was basically saying, don't judge street thugs, don't judge, so-called criminals or poor people. You didn't make something of yourself. Well, if you start with nothing, it's really hard to accrue anything. And in the case of bad relationships, bad decisions you make when you're a kid, or maybe they were foisted upon you, are you ever really going to escape the gravity well of your family? If you have a bad relationship with it, if you had a bad romance, are you ever going to escape that? Even when you move on or remarried, do you ever completely shed that? And in the case of the broadsword, it's a gravity well. Can he escape it? He can paddle away from it, but that riptide just keeps pulling him back out to sea. And so there's that going on. I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious, but it also works on multiple levels. It's just as this metaphor that just keeps repeating upon itself. The idea that you just can't most of us cannot ever escape our rearing as children. We can only, it's like being a diabetic. I can take insulin, I can exercise properly, I can eat properly, but I'm never going to escape managing my illness. I don't think most of us ever escape our past. We just manage it.
Yeah, there is no cure for childhood. Absolutely. Jeremiah Cook asks, he says he'd love to know where the name for the hotel came from, the Broadsword.
You know, I can't remember where it came from. It's set in a real place. Somebody on my Patreon asked me, how'd you come up with it? Is that a real building? And I said, the hotel's not real. It's kind of based on, in my mind, on the Wilsonian in Seattle back when it was actually a hotel. It's not an apartment building, but it had a ball. It's in the U district. The Wilsonian is. It's about 7 stories. It's kind of in a U shape, and so it has like a quad. They'd shoot movies there, wow. And it used to have a ballroom and bar, and or a speakeasy, and it has a underground level with barber shops and all this stuff. And I don't know what it was that was drying up in the 90s when I was around there. But so spiritually, it's kind of aesthetically, it's based on that. I actually, though the location is a real location in Olympia, there's I want to say a retirement home or something, clinic retirement home on this lot on a hill overlooking the bay. Wow. And it kind of overlooks the valley where historic Olympia is. Olympia has a west side and an east side, and they're kind of one side sort of commercial. They make all of the Walmart type stuff and in the malls and stuff kind of back up in there. They have the historic section in the middle with the marina and the downtown and there's the governor, or there's the Capitol up the hill just a little bit. And then the other side, the east side, is a lot of residential stuff. And so I set it on the Capitol side, and there's actually a big old sprawling building there. I don't know really what it is though. But the name, I decided to use it because once again, it's like Bulldozer. You go into that story thinking bulldozer. Oh, is it about a killer bulldozer? Is it about bulldozer? For example, the etymology of the word is bull, as in a Brahma bull, doser, like somebody who shoots up. You give a bull a dose of a whip or a stick or whatever it is, and that became one word, bulldozer, and it was to be a bully, to basically to plow people under, and then of course, as time went on, it's a machine now, which does pretty much the same thing. Well, the broadsword, I just looked at that and went, what a great name. I'm gonna use that. It just felt right. To this day, I'm gonna say it's one of those rare times where I don't have a diabolical explanation for it. I simply said, no, this is the right title, and partially because it's not. You start reading the story, like, what's this guy do with a broadsword? What's the hotel? And the implication of a slicing implement, I think that fits almost any horror story, to some of the piercing nature, the slashing nature of it. But really, when we get down to it, it's incongruous. It's just this strange artifact of the tongue that maybe it will appear again with more relevance somewhere down the line in my antiquity stories, probably.
But we had a couple of questions about, will we see the broadsword again? Of course, we saw it it's in Jaws of Saturn, and then referenced in, I think, the Croning and Hand of Glory as well.
That's right.
But there's a question about whether we'd actually see
a
story set there again.
Yeah, and you'll probably see the weapon too.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Because the one thing about the antiquity stories is that I model the whole theory of the alternate Earth the same way that King does his territories. Anybody's read like the Talisman gets the idea that there's the double. You go to this other universe and everybody kind of has a double there. Roger Zelazny had the Shadow Earths. I take it a slightly different direction. Some of that does like there might be a Laird Barron, and maybe he's not a writer in that universe. Maybe he's a politician. Who knows? But Laird Barron could also be a model of wagon. Or the broadsword instead of a hotel in that universe could be actually there's somebody's broadsword. So I'm playing with that, but
I love that.
There certainly will be, as far as in our contemporary, in like the contemporary stories that I write, I can't imagine that I wouldn't, if I'm around long enough, that I wouldn't do another story that takes place in the hotel itself.
Very good, very good. And then I asked Edward if he would bring up, come back on stage to ask you a question about Catch Hell.
Sure.
He has I think a theory he wanted to pitch out to you, and then there's like one other question I had from the Reddit. I'll ask about that.
Sure.
Hey again, guys. So Laird, actually, I finished Catch Hell, and as soon as I finished it, I went immediately to Greg's Laird Barron subreddit because I had to know kind of the ending of it. It's one of my favorite stories that you've done. It's easily a top 5 story. My theory when I finished it was that each of the husband and the wife each make a Faustian bargain. They each make a deal with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
His deal was to have a baby. Her deal was for him to die. And so then at the end of the story, when they have sex, and then he kind of melts or disintegrates, it seems like the sex act, both of the deals came together at the same time.
I think that's fairly close. I have a slightly different interpretation I'm not going to share, but that's close enough to it that basically I think it's enough to say that whether old Bill is the devil or just their desires, dark desires made manifest. The idea of that wishes are either wonderful things or they're dark and they get perverted. That anybody that would grant anything that would grant you a wish is going to twist it. Is the operating principle there. But obviously, that's another story about guilt. The character in that was based in part. Almost all the characters in these stories, second and third book, are based on, and Swift to Chase as well. A lot of the characters, I shouldn't say most, but many of them are based on. There's real life analogs to them, and I just took pieces and said, "Oh, yeah." In this case, Cat is based on. There was a woman, I believe, in Canada many years ago who dropped her baby off an overpass. To me, it goes back to the Scott Peterson situation. Seems on the surface, yeah, guilty. But then when you start hearing the counter arguments, no, I never hurt my wife. I have an alibi, but it's not really an alibi. But then there's some weird, the Innocence Project is trying to help him right now. And they have a pretty good track record of being correct. So in her case, the lady who dropped her baby said, no, the baby slipped out of my arms. I didn't consciously do that intentionally. And that's a really chilling line for me. It's really obvious and easy to have an opinion when someone does something reprehensible. You're like, yeah, this person drowned their child, or they threw them, they stabbed them, they did something overt. You're like, but how do you psychologically handle as a society? How do we grapple with, what if she's telling the truth and she didn't? And what if it's some gray middle area where she didn't consciously drop the baby, but what if she didn't, like it was in her mind? I mean, who hasn't had a negative thought? Not say about babies, everybody calm down. But I mean, just, have you ever thought a bad thought about somebody and then something happens? You're like, I didn't mean that. I threw a rock at my brother one time. I had no intention of hitting him, but I was mad at him. And that rock, I swear, veered. Like somebody else said, oh no, you're going to hit him. My doppelganger. The point is, the act and the potential, what they call it, the action potential, kinesthesiologist or whatever they'll talk about. You can say, okay, fist, open. It's not opening. But when I'm serious, but what's that? There's something called the action potential. I'm sending a signal, but I'm not, it's a potential until I actually say, yeah, okay, whatever biochemical signal goes through to actually open my hand. But I'm thinking about opening it right now. I can see it in my mind. I'm opening it. It doesn't open. But what happens when there's a glitch in there? Boom, it popped open. But in this case, she's thinking, this baby's, what a drag. Oh, shit. And then pretty quick, everybody's telling you, it's like gaslighting. Everybody's telling you, you murdered your baby. And so the whole story is about her going, she doesn't really know if she feels guilty enough that she resented the baby and him. It made sense in her mind that, what's the difference whether they did it on purpose or not, kind of thing.
And Whitney.
I caught a lot of hell for that story, though, by the way. And Catch Hell, by the way, there's an old expression. People were like, what's the title? And I was like, well, there's an old kind of a redneck title, or poor person title phrase called catch pregnant. I grew up with that. Oh, so-and-so caught pregger. So they she's be careful, you're going to catch pregnant. It's just, it's just this, idiom basically that it's fallen out of favor. So I don't think most people caught on to that. But I had a lot of grief over that story, actually.
Whitney here is saying that she thought Kat's desire was to be punished.
She's 100% correct, and that ties in with Danny in the Lagerstadt, wanting to be punished. They both, out of different reasons, but the idea of, and even Keith, actually he's nameless in Occultation, but there's a certain level of he wants to be punished in that story.
Wow.
To me, it's not a gender issue whatsoever, even though those two characters, there's like, and if I look at it, there's another character in there that's in the collection that there's a certain level of I want to be punished. But with Kat, it's just 100% over. Danny too, that they both, because of guilt, they tacitly accept abuse. And that really angered some people. In Occultation, also Catch Hell, but also it touches a nerve, animals and kids, and the fact that a mother would, even though we see it way too many times, this lady drowns her kids in the bathtub, she puts them in the back of a car and rolls them into the, and men do it too, obviously, but the point being is, it doesn't matter that this was something that I can pluck it out of the news for you. There you go. Like I said, I based it on a real event. It really pissed off people, which of course fills me with nothing but glee. I don't care whether you like it or hate it. I want you to feel something. And every time somebody tells me because I've been told, I cancel my subscription and burnt that copy of Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. I'm just like, my nipples got hard. I'm like, this is fucking fabulous. And
wow.
This comes from, I was taught how to look at this by an editor, old Gordon Van Gelder. He said, you only want one of two things, the Oscar Wilde thing. You either want to be praised or you want to be, basically excoriated. Nothing in the middle. Nothing's worse than, No, you want that son of a bitch. Why do they let him write? If you can't have, wow, that was the greatest thing ever. Thank you. I'll take either one of them. And, I always never want to hurt somebody's feelings or something, or misrepresent something. But I was never accused of credibly misrepresenting. It was just more, how dare you? That's such a, why would you do that? Why would you make me feel like that? I'm like, that's my job.
Yes. And why is the reader reading horror fiction if they don't want to be disturbed in some way? To some
trust
degree?
me, I'm not casting aspersions. I'm just saying I don't care.
Yeah.
At all.
Fair enough. Well, we've taken a lot of your time tonight, and I think we've gotten through all the questions that we had on Reddit. This has just been, well, again, we've gotten a little bit of I think maybe some secrets told and some good insights into many of your stories here. And folks are digging into the beautiful thing that awaits us all already. We're super excited about that. And then, and again, of course, everyone, as we wrap up now, remember that Not a Speck of Light comes out on September 10. If you haven't ordered that, pre-order it from Bad Hand Books. It will be, and that Bad Hand is only sending in shipping in the U.S., but you can also pre-order it if you're outside the U.S. on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other vendors, and you will be able to get that overseas as well, or outside the U.S.
Great publisher, Doug. He does fabulous work. You should go check out his growing catalog. It's just really exemplary work by really great authors. I feel honored and lucky to be part of his catalog, and I hope to we have plans for more stuff besides this.
Thrilled about that. Thrilled that, and I know Doug, from having talked with him some, I know he's taken a real interest in continuing the good stories that you're telling now and writing. So we're really excited about that relationship there.
Yeah, just in general, I'm really proud of what he's doing and proud to be part of it.
Yeah, no, he's really collected the books. I'm clearing off one shelf just for Bad Hand Books publications, because these are.
It's going to be more. I want to see him keep going, because I really feel like he's going to bring out a lot of cool books in the coming years.
Absolutely. And then remember. Patreon. Go sign up for Patreon. At the very least, just follow the free membership. But then I'm really excited about new serialized fiction coming out very soon.
I tell you guys, I'm super. This is obviously it's helpful to me to have a different income stream, but steadier. That's already happening. I appreciate that, but I'm really enthused about. I'm seeing the possibilities for different kinds of stories that I can tell, and like I said, I'm beginning my odyssey of putting original dark fantasy horror serialized fiction up, and I'm stoked about this turning into this really for me an important archive. And so between this and the our Laird Barron subreddit, I'm really thrilled with response in the community. And I really thank you guys for supporting me in all these different ways. It's not only is it just helpful to me, financially, but also, buying my books and all this stuff. But I'm really more energized than I've ever been. My health is still pretty shaky, and this move is not really a good timing. But I have found myself being extremely energized by the possibilities of writing for this project. So
wonderful, good. Yeah, absolutely. I've been thrilled to see the. I don't know about a resurgence in interest, but it's definitely resurfacing. We're seeing a lot of people come out and say, "Man, I loved that story. That was the first story I ever read by Laird. Was whatever the story is," and just seeing people kind of more focusing their interest in your work. Again, it's like 2024 is. It's a great year to be a Laird Barron reader, and we're thrilled to have new stories coming out and your Patreon. It's a really a fun time.
Yeah, it really has been, despite all the turmoil of what's going on. This has been a really good year so far, and I'm just glad that we're all, I feel like we're all this community, the larger horror community too. But just, I don't know, I feel like this is like a team effort in a lot of ways, and it's new for me, and I really I'm appreciating it.
Absolutely. All right. We've got about a dozen people who've been on this call for over 2 hours now. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around for us. This has been a lot of fun. Laird, great chatting with you again.
My pleasure.
Right.
Bye, Edward.
Bye. Thanks, guys.